Thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm Emily and we've got Tom Conway behind the scenes being the producer. We both work in the National Church's Strategy and Development Unit, which supports dioceses as they deliver their strategic development funding. We're going to talk to a range of people from different sorts of projects over the next few weeks to hear the stories of what this funding is supporting in churches across the country. This is our fourth SDF Stories webinar. Last week, we spoke to Rachel Eden, who is part of Manchester's Children Changing Places project, and that video is now available on YouTube. Just search SDF Stories and that'll take you to our page where you can watch it. And this week, we'll be talking to John Brett and Dylan Edwards, who are part of the diverse track of planting in the small to small church plants project, also in Manchester Diocese. There'll be a Q&A at the end, so please do submit your questions throughout and we'll get to them at the end. And this episode will be recorded and available on YouTube afterwards. So this project is about small church plants which seek to build on a model where the church plants stay reasonably small and they're really situated in areas of deprivation with a real focus on relationships. When they grow to about 50 people, their plan is to plant into another church where they grow bigger, and they received SDF funding to support this project in 2018. John and Dylan, do you want to introduce yourselves and say a bit about what you do?
Hi, I'm John. I lead the diverse track, which does a lot of the planting, particularly in inner cities and in mill towns and areas with high levels of
Hi guys, my name is Dylan Edwards. I'm a church planter on the diverse side, the diverse track of Antioch as well, and I'm based in Rochdale.
Great. And so what's the overarching vision for the project as it is at the moment?
The overarching vision is small churches, which plant small churches. The small churches operate in a particular way. They're much easier to lead than bigger churches. They can be more adaptable to their environments. They can be, they find it easier to know who's there and be hospitable. And actually, so multiplying those small churches is a kind of particular way of doing church. And it also allows people who aren't paid and who aren't ordained to lead those under supervision. So it's basically just about multiplying those churches like a yeast across the Diocese of Manchester.
Great. And tell us a bit more about Manchester and how the project fits in specifically into your location, really.
Well, we have lots of different locations. I mean, I work in like inner city strip of Manchester, southern Manchester, which is very kind of multiply diverse. I mean, it has people from like every continent. And so we have this process where we will go in, like you get a team leader and then you gather a team and then you start working on the rhythms of that team, praying, finding a venue, and then you kind of go live. Whereas Dylan is in a big mill town on sort of outside the main city itself. And so he's working, I guess, in some ways, an area with a lot of similarities, right? Would you say, Dylan? Is it similar?
And what, sorry?
Like the diversity you've got in Rochdale and the way that you partner with different kind of ethnic groups in Rochdale.
Yeah. It's very diverse and there's many communities, who we're trying to reach. Yeah.
Great. So how, in a bit more detail, how do the small to small church plants work and how do they differ to a normal church plant as we think of it?
Well, I mean, there isn't one way of doing a church plant. I mean, there are ways, for example, down in London where you've got a sort of, you don't have enough buildings. I mean, typically your church plant with like relatively big churches, teams. Whereas these church plants are based heavily around growing leaders. You find one leader who might not even be paid. I mean, normally that's our goal, that they wouldn't be paid, and they'll just gather people around them. And the church is really simple. It's designed to be small. It's designed to operate between 20 to 50 people. And it's designed as that individual gathers a team, which then gathers a community. That's basically what we do. And so it's almost, we have 3 stages of church planting. Find that person, you train them, they gather a team, they pray, they read, they find what they're going to do. And that's what we call the sort of dream to reality phase. And Dylan's just moving out of that phase right now. And then there's your church, your life, you're doing it. And it differs because so much of it is around relationships, I guess, more than systems. You know, the person gathers their team and it's about relationships, it's about just sharing that vision. And that those relationships then expand into these kind of small communities. So there's lots of different ways of planting churches, but yeah, this is one of them.
Great. And so what sort of people come along to your church plants? Kind of what's your standard community like?
Like even for us in Rochdale, you know, like, and I think, you know, it's kind of the same, like the Lord has been just so good because he's answered prayer. Do you know what I mean? Because we really, in Rochdale, we were starting from scratch. Do you know what I mean? We had no team, there was, you know, no one here. So it's just wonderful how the Lord has brought people together. Do you know what I mean? Because in like our team here in Rochdale, the team is very diverse. Do you know, we connected from a couple from Nepal. Obviously myself, I'm Irish, another one of my friends as well. So it's been just wonderful how we've been able to connect with these people inside Rochdale and outside, and how the Lord has brought them together, us together as well.
Great. And so what does a typical week, if there is such a thing as a typical week really, in your kind of project look like?
So, I mean, there's kind of like 2 levels of our project. One is church and the other is network. So we don't really encourage people to just do as many activities as you can, because that will burn them out. I mean, so for example, our church, which was planted in 2018, is the church will meet on a Sunday. Its kind of main midweek is on Zoom. Then it's got prayer. Then it's got actually there's 2 prayer sessions, which are both on Zoom. And then it's got a series of like one-to-one meetups. We've just relaunched something which is like Bible in English, which is actually why I am where I am now. But a lot of the time, if we're going to do something like Bible in English, or like the plant we're doing into Rusholme, we'll get people from the network, the wider network, to help emerging churches. So this network of churches that we have allows us, say we want to do Bible in English, to pull in a kind of teacher from somewhere else, or if we want to like do an event, we'll pull in someone from the network. So it's almost like you've got church-based events and then you've got network things where people are helping out. And actually there's that goal of just making sure that it's a community that people can relate to through the week. If that makes sense. Yeah,
no, it does. You mentioned Bible and English course. What does kind of diversity in your congregations look like, and how do you work with any language barriers and things?
So we got a number of strategies for working across language barriers. One is that we use English as our main language, obviously, but if you say you've got a group of people who are meeting in Arabic, then you want an Arabic Bible study group leader who's also part of the church. So in Hope Church, it's on Zoom, we have an Arabic Bible study, or you might have a Farsi Bible study. So you do work with groups outside the main English language service. Now, in the English language service, and you actually want leaders who will really take that group to heart and really care about them and sort of get involved in their lives. Also, I mean, for us on a Sunday in Hope Church, we will tend to use a mixture of texts. For us, we will tend to use, say, Romanian and Kurdish on our PowerPoint slides. And we also do, we do these Google Translate cheat sheets where the speaker writes out a simplified version of their talk using a whole series of short sentences and then just Google translates it. And it actually works really well. Google Translate is good these days. It's doing a good job. And we back translated to check that it's not gone horribly wrong. But so we actually hand out multilingual cheat sheets, which they're not poetry, but actually we can use AI to do some of your work for you on a Sunday.
That's great.
Just to add to that as well, just in Rochdale, like we have a Bible study on a Monday. It's an Iranian Bible study. So like, you know, we're looking for a part-time Farsi language worker to come in. You know, as John said, sometimes you want, you know, the leader to speak their language. But what we've done is one of the people that comes, they have decent English. And obviously, you know, their first language is Farsi. So we've kind of raised them up into a bit of a leadership role there as well, inside the Bible study, rather than sending someone in as well. So it was to encourage that person as well.
Bringing up kind of leaders from within. That's great. So what are some of the obstacles you faced in setting up these? You seem to have like completely counted the languages, but are there any other obstacles you've faced just in the church planting?
I think when you church plant, I think some people feel like, hey, this is a magic bullet. We can church plant, it's going to solve all our problems. It's like it's not going to solve all your problems. And I think one of the things about church planting is that, as we say, you rip people away from their existing churches, which are people that they love and people who love them. And you say, well, hey, make room in your life for new people who you don't know. You know, and we often we teach you Abraham leaving Mesopotamia and going down to the Promised Land. Because go to a land that you don't know. Go leave the people who love you and you love and come and hang out with people who you've never even met. That's a hard thing. And for many people, you know, we reckon, and this isn't just us, this is kind of almost like the literature. You're going to lose people in that process. They're going to buy into the vision, but actually find out it's not what they want. The literature says you're going to lose 50% of the people who go set out with you on a church plant. Now, it's not 50%, but, you know, it's tough. And then as you start that process, again, in a normal church, there'll be networks of people who are pretty comfortable with it. They'll be able to reach out and sort of start connecting with the fringe. Again, when you start a church plant, you've got to sort of garden that all over again. And like a lot of gardening metaphors kind of come back to us. It's like you're planting a garden in the wild. And, you know, it takes a lot of guts, and some people do find it tough or disappointing, or they'll look at the leader and think, you weren't what I expected. But then, you know, leaders never are quite what people expect. So, yeah, just like expectations and dealing with stuff that's genuinely tough, and just always understanding why you're doing it, I think would be a big thing.
Thank you. Yeah. And how has I don't talk about obstacles, but how has the network been doing during lockdown? How has that impacted your work?
It's been going on Zoom is fine for some people, but not for others. And I think in particular, there's churches tend to be sort of creatures of habit. And particularly on the diverse track, we have quite a lot of what you might call throughput. People move in, people move out, people connect. And it's almost, I think with lockdown, because we rely so heavily on relationships, love, kindness, just showing people Jesus, or just kind of bring the gospel into their lives first up. When it's more difficult to do that, we don't have those ingrained habits that will keep people sticking with us month after month after month after month online without that personal touch. So it's almost like, although on the one hand, we can work well on Zoom because we're not that big, on the other hand, for some people, particularly around the fringe of the church, and those people that we're trying to invest into, it's pretty tough for them on Zoom. And some of them will just move or move away. And it's actually difficult to kind of get new people in using your online platforms. And certainly new people who will go on connecting with you once you start meeting face to face. So it's almost like digital is here, face to face is here. And for us on the diverse track, those don't really come that close. So the Arabic Bible study, I have people checking in from France, Gulf, but they're not gonna, they're not gonna check, they're not gonna keep traveling with us.
No, it's been a difficult time, I think, for all churches to kind of navigate that. And how mentioned before the SDF grant, which is why we're here, but how has that helped you deliver your ministry, and how do you work with that?
Well, the FDS grant, like our whole ministry was, it was almost, this was almost a new strategy. The Diocese of Manchester was amazing in getting into a vision, which was pretty unusual for an Anglican diocese to say, okay, that's totally different. And it's not only totally different from conventional parish stuff, it's totally different from, say, a resource church model. So actually, the whole process of writing the SDF grant was important financially, but also working with the diocese, thinking ahead strategically about how Manchester is going to change. It's been really exciting, and it's almost like the SDF wasn't just a funder, it was a partner in that process. But it's been incredibly encouraging for me. I was in Manchester Diocese anyway, just to see that vision growing, and not just resources, but also partnership.
Great. And what would you say, both of your personal highlights of the project so far have been a particular moments that stand out for you?
I think for me is, well, one, it's not just resources, John said, it's partnership as well. So we're ended up kind of being on this board as well, where we're partnering with other people, other church leaders as well. And we have a prayer meeting every Sunday, which has been a real blessing as well, just to partner with people, to pray with people, to encourage people. So that's wonderful. That's been kind of my highlight.
Great. John?
I would say the fact that when you talk vision, it's really hard for people sometimes, but the kind of people who get it are young guys. I have a 22-year-old daughter who is also working at a church plant now in Birmingham, and she's saying, look at all these young guys in their 20s who seem to kind of actually get what you're doing and want to share it with you, and sort of, it's almost we have the complete opposite demographic problem to most churches, is that we're overloaded with young men, and which is good. No, it's good. And actually that people get that vision and want to be a part of it. It's been really exciting.
That's really great. And is there anything you think you do differently next time if you were doing things again, or that you've learned during the couple of years it's been going?
I think if I was you, I wouldn't start from here. It's one of these things, I think one of the things that I would have liked to do is just spent a lot more time putting the vision out there, really explaining what we're doing on wider platforms. And because we know what we're doing, as we have jobs and stuff, that it's not for everyone. So, it's been amazing working with Dylan, because we both totally get what the network is about. But it's not easy, particularly for Anglicans. People who particularly come from within a parish system say, actually, well, how would this work differently? And I think just taking a longer run up, putting it out there, I think particularly recruiting people for our paid jobs, I would take probably a longer run up at that, put the message out there for a longer time.
Yeah. And Dylan, anything from you? I mean, you
Not
can.
really. No.
Yeah.
John said it all.
You do it all exactly the same again, which is good. And what's next for the network? What are the rest of your plans?
I think one of the things that we're looking to invest into pretty heavily in the next phase is just the busiest and highest footfall parts of the city. So I'm actually in Rochdale at the moment, which is about a mile from where I live. This is like incredibly busy. And so there's a ministry centre that we set up in an earlier phase of the project. And actually using this ministry centre is a really fruitful way of connecting with non-Christians. So places like Rochdale, places like the city centre, I think we'll be investing very heavily into those and building up the network so that people can be just signposted into the right churches, whether those are churches actually in Rochdale, in the city centre, or actually whether it's like you say to people, hey, maybe you want something a little bit more stable that doesn't meet at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. You know, maybe you want to go to something on a Sunday morning, and then they can like head for another congregation. So yeah, just going kind of deep into those, just the busiest parts of the city, putting the word out, connecting with a whole load of people. So that's where we're investing right now.
Great. No, that's really encouraging to hear. If anyone has any questions in the audience, please do submit them. We've got one, which is obviously your church plants are based within other parishes. How do you work with existing parishes? Like, yeah, what's the relationship with the parishes you're working in?
I think kind of like for us in Rochdale, it's been really key to work with other people. Do you know what I mean? Even the Iranian Bible study, that's connected with one of the local churches here in the town as well. And we're also hoping to work alongside a church in kind of one of the more diverse kind of areas as well, maybe Islamic areas. Me and John are hoping to take a service. So, Jesus said in John 17, for his church, his body to be united. And then that's when the world will see. So we want to stand side by side in the faith. And we're hoping to do evangelism, Bible studies like the Iranian one as well. So that's Rochdale anyway.
Great. Another question that's come in. How are you setting up your plants to enable them to plant again? Kind of that multiplication method you talked about earlier.
So we, before I came into this, I was working in a church plant, and it kind of grew. So we just kind of took a little bit of a meat cleaver and just split it down the middle, which is okay, but you can only do that so often. And so one of the things we talk about is moving from a model of asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction, which is when we plant, what we're doing is we're always looking for leaders. Mm-hmm. And for specifically a leader to get a vision, and then we as a network would kind of support them, looking, well, how can we get a team? How can we build that vision? And so, yeah, if you think of the whole network as essentially a mentoring process of growing leaders, we would aim to plant not necessarily by just taking a chunk of people from one congregation, but actually saying, look, here's how we could help. And that's true, say, for example, in Dylan's team, like 2 of the people in or around his team have come out of other churches that, been involved with. So again, that's an example of, what you call the kind of sexual reproduction, the kind of different genes within, from different congregations going into a new congregation.
Great, yeah, no, that's brilliant. And another question, which is, what advice would you give to dioceses and churches who are trying to increase their outreach to diverse areas?
Well, make sure you know what you're doing. Would be one thing. I think if you if you are spreading the gospel, then spread the gospel. I mean, the gospel is, we don't want to, maybe you don't want to talk about it. It's the call to conversion. And if that's your goal, then call to conversion. That's one thing. I mean, and work out exactly how that is going to work. And because I think a lot of the time, particularly when you're dealing with religious identities, we can be overawed by those religious identities. We tend to see them as quite fixed, whereas in fact, they're increasingly fluid, dynamic religious identities. And increasingly, people are mixing up their religious identity. Change at that level is happening at an accelerating rate. But if you want to speak to people of a particular generation, and you want people to respond to the call to conversion, and just make sure that what you're doing is aiming at that, rather than aiming at, say, just stopping at social programs. Just be intentional, because you will succeed. It's very likely you'll succeed if you know what you're doing and you're prepared to learn from your own mistakes and nothing else.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what you're doing, or you're not prepared to learn, then failure awaits.
No, thanks. That's really helpful and really encouraging, actually, that you just, learning from the mistakes, I think. And there's one more question, which is, what's the difference between your strand and the estate side of the Antioch Network?
So the estate side uses a lot of what you might call very local theory, traditional incarnational theory, of like moving into a specific area. Where we are less interested in areas and much more interested in things like ethnic networks. So what Dylan's going to be doing isn't planting into a specific part of Rochdale, which the Estates Network will do. Dylan just plants into Rochdale, which is a town of over 200,000 people. It's just anywhere that people will come. So for that reason, we are much more interested in kind of connecting the networks. And the other part of that is it's somewhat easy for us to grow leaders, because a lot of migrants, and particularly kind of relatively footloose migrants, really, they're quite capable people. They might be poor, but they're not, but they're really go-getters. They got up and went, that's why they're here. So it's a bit easier for us to grow leaders as well. Is that fair, Dylan?
Yeah, because obviously estates, sometimes it could be a little bit slower maybe in the States as well. Do you know what I mean? Because especially with COVID as well, and all in our network, we're very relational, but especially when you're in the States as well, you're inviting people, to your homes as well, which you can't do now. But yeah, so it's pretty much what John says, getting people around the world, and then, having a vision and just being clear with it as well. But it is different on either side. Yeah.
Great. Just had another question in, which is, it must be tough to do both leaving and losing and then gaining and growing in your church planting process. Do you think this is countercultural, and what leadership skills are required? It's quite a big question.
I think it's more difficult for older people. I think as you get older, you invest so much into relationships. And here's a big thing when you ask, when we divided the church I was in before, some people were like, you can't take my kids' friends away from them. It's like, that it is difficult, and the only the only thing you can do, like this is generally true in any church thing, but it's true in church planting in particular, is that people have to want to do it. Like if you want to do it, you'll do it. And if you don't want to do it, well, yeah, probably won't do it. So it's envisioning people, praying with people, praying that the Lord will kind of get through that, just helping people want to do it. And I think for us as leaders as well, connecting with people who aren't Christians, showing people how it could work, showing people like what the fruit of what we do can be. I think people often they have to see why they're doing it, not just be told why they're doing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, thank you. That's great. I'd love to wrap up by praying for you both and your projects. Is there anything that we can pray for you for?
Well, just for us in Rochdale, we're hoping to launch our first church service next month. So prayer for that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Really exciting. John, anything?
Well, it's just that prayer Jesus prayed. Pray to the Lord of the harvest, send workers into the harvest. And yeah, just pray to the Lord of the harvest, send workers into the harvest.
Yeah. Great. Should we pray? Father, thank you that you gave your only Son so that everyone could have an opportunity to know him. Thank you that through making available national funding, we're able to help more people encounter you. We lift up to you the people of Manchester Diocese, especially those involved in the Antioch Network of church plants. Thank you for the work that Dylan and John and their colleagues are doing in sharing your good news and love with people, and just that you're enabling them to build relationships and encourage and develop leaders in that. We pray for Rochdale's first church service launching next month. We pray that they're able to meet safely despite or because of COVID restrictions, and that all those who come really encounter you. I pray also for, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, and I just pray that you provide plenty of workers for the harvest in their work. And finally, help us all in whatever roles we do, in the roles you've given us to advance your kingdom in every part of this nation. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been really great to talk to you. This video will be available on YouTube from probably about tomorrow afternoon. And so do share it with anyone in your networks. This is a series of 6 conversations with practitioners in different SDF projects. And next week, Tom will be talking to Tim Montgomery about Transforming Wigan, which is Liverpool's project to where churches across the whole deanery are being brought together to collaborate in evangelism and to make significant changes to transform the future of mission in Wigan. The Church of England is also running some other webinars at the moment. If you just go to the Church of England website and search webinars, lots of stuff comes up, and there's some really good things there. So I'd advise you to take a look. And finally, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and hopefully see you next week. And thank you to John and Dylan for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.